Jackanoid Paralope is a mission-driven media company. Check out more of our podcasts at jackanoidparalope.com.
Jackanoid Paralope!
Michael.
Nathaniel.
What is hypergamy?
All I know is that's the reason why, since 35, I've been getting mad.
From Jackanoid Paralope, this is the Beta Boy Breakdown with Michael and Nathaniel.
Okay, so for this episode, I was running it through with my girlfriend yesterday. I was just like talking to her the points to see how it like flowed a little bit, and she kept looking at me really weird, and I was finally like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "You don't believe any of the shit that you're saying right now, do you?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And so she was like, "You need a word that you can put on your podcast that's like means I don't actually mean any of this stuff, but this is what they think." So, Nathaniel, I want you to go with me on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should have that word, and I think it should be Omaha.
Omaha. Okay. So,
yeah. So have you seen Ted Lasso?
Yes. Oh, right. It's like the truth telling moment, right? Like
yes,
when you say Omaha,
moment.
you gotta say the truth.
Yeah. So actually, it's one level before that. It starts with a Peyton Manning reference, and since I'm here in Tennessee, where Peyton Manning is God, I figured let's go with that. So,
Okay.
Peyton Manning used to, when he came up to the line of scrimmage, shout the word Omaha like several times over and over again, and people would ask him, "What does it mean?" And he would give like the kind of funny Peyton Manning answer where he was like, "It means it's a run or it's a pass. It means it could go long unless it's going short. It means I'm going right unless I decide to go left." He like did that. And so Omaha just became this kind of like, what does it mean kind of thing. So I think if we use that, uh, uh it can be a gag throughout this episode, or it can be like all the time. I think I'm going to get on the Omaha train. I'm going to try to make Omaha a thing.
In practice,
yeah,
you're saying that like if this came out of the conversation with your girlfriend, that if you were saying something that sounds like real out there, and I interject Omaha to say like, do you actually believe this type thing? Or you were the one saying like, women are bad, men should be dominant to them, Omaha, something like that.
Yeah, I think something like that. That's how I was envisioning it.
Right,
but I think the other person could call us out on Omaha too. And you're like, Omaha? Could be a question. Omaha?
Know what? Let's just see how it flies, man.
Yeah, why the fuck not? Why the fuck not? Okay. So, as the listener can probably get from the title of this episode, today we are talking about hypergamy and taking a deep dive into what the concept is, where it came from, how it shows up in the red-pilled manosphere, and all of that kind of stuff. So now we've done enough of these episodes by now that like I think we need to like locate ourselves a little bit in the red-pilled manosphere. Like we're in slightly familiar territory with other episodes and people's beliefs. So like it might be a little good to if the listener is just joining in on this episode, I don't want to like, be past their name and terminology. So I think it's valuable to kind of like talk about where we are in the red-pilled manosphere with hypergamy. So, Nathaniel, do you remember the pickup artists?
Yes,
and
I
who
do.
they were?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, tell me who the pickup artists were.
Well, there was Grimble, there was Mystery, there was Style.
LOL. Yes, there were. So funny names, right? There are a lot of funny names.
There were men who employ certain tactics to basically prompt psychological dominance over women who are susceptible to it, to a certain approach, in order to get, as you open this episode, mad pussy.
Yeah. So these guys are the Don Juans. They are the people who are trying to sleep with as many women as possible. And so they have come up with different systems and different tricks and different tips, all based in this pseudo-scientific, pseudo-psychological world to like hack the mainframe of a woman's brain and get her to sleep with him. So hypergamy is in their world. It's a term that they use a lot. and has come to be something synonymous with pickup artists. You don't really hear it in other areas of the manosphere, like tradcons and Christian fundamentalists don't talk about hypergamy, especially not in the way that like a PUA would. So when we're talking hypergamy, we're talking in this area. So I want to just kind of ground us in that space. But I also want to call out that when we're talking about PUAs and we're talking about the red-pilled manosphere in general, we're going to be ignoring queer relationships in this. I think that's important to call out from the beginning that like any type of queer relationship we are not talking about, even though their language is going to say all women think this. All relationships go in this structure. All. They're going to be very definite, but queer relationships are not on their radar at all. And I think that's important to kind of call out. So when you hear me or Nathaniel in this episode talking about, all women, what we mean, or what I mean, I should say that, is straight cis women. That's who we're talking about because that's who they're talking about. So if you're a queer woman out there, you're a queer person out there, and you don't hear yourself represented in like what we're talking about, yeah, it's probably not.
And I dare say, because part of this episode, I did crowdsource a very fun question with a theater collective that I go to here in New York. That's the hook. And so I took your question and I brought it there. And so if you're listening to this and you're from that community, and in fact, if you're the person who made sure I knew that this question was inherently flawed because it doesn't apply to all women, then you're represented here too. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That was a liberal dunk that you just did. You got liberal dunked.
Well, I did for sure.
Okay. Nathaniel, what's your understanding of hypergamy? It's a term that a lot of people might not have heard if they're just tuning into this and new to the red pill manosphere. But if you're in the red pill manosphere, it is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, so we did a little pre-convo yesterday ahead of this episode, so I have a little bit more clarity than I did before that, but I'm still not 100% clear. So what I would sum it up as is kind of breaking down romantic attraction or sexual romantic worth into a system. Red Pill Manosphere loves their systems. To basically rank what makes a man most valuable, a woman most valuable, and kind of approaching romantic relationships from kind of like that capitalist value mindset, that individualist level up mindset. Maybe.
Yeah, I think all of that's in there. I think the definition you gave kind of captures a little bit more of how it applies, like how they apply the term.
Sure.
But all of that is in there. So they apply it in a very capitalistic way, in a very marketplace way, which we'll get into a little bit. The term itself just means the practice of marrying or mating up. So the practice of looking for a partner, a romantic partner that is in some way elevated above you, and that might be financially, that might be, status wise, that might be career wise, all of that kind of stuff that is a part of dating that we don't like to talk about, where it's like, yeah, there's a person's attractiveness and yeah, there's their personal qualities, but also they make a lot of money, so that kind of stuff that we don't like to talk about. That's kind of like that hypergamy stuff, right? It's there, it exists, fortunate or unfortunate, it depends on the person, but that's just what it means. So while we talked about the red pill manosphere, let's take a second. I think it's valuable at the beginning of every episode to define the red pill manosphere again, in case this is the first episode you're tuning into of us. So I have a definition that I'm kind of like using as a living definition. And so if you listen to episodes previous to this, you'll notice that I changed this definition just a little bit.
Ooh.
So yeah, nothing too major, but I think it's good if this keeps evolving because the red pill manosphere keeps evolving.
I'm very excited to see the evolution, right? Michael, in real time.
It's not that bad, don't worry. So the red pill manosphere, I define it as quote unquote waking up to the quote unquote truth that modern feminism has ruined society and the solution is for men to reassert a rigid patriarchal framing over American culture, romantic relationships, and public policies. So that's what taking the red pill means. It means that you have woken up against a matrix idea to the idea that feminism is the source of all evil. And so in this episode, again, we're talking about hypergamy and why hypergamy matters as an idea and as a concept. Um, so hypergamy is a root belief for pickup artists. All their behaviors and their beliefs can be kind of seen and broken down as reactions to this idea of hypergamy, to the idea of mating up. And of course, what they believe is that women, their mind, their worldview is a hypergamous worldview, right? They are constantly trying to mate and date up. And
So you said this is
because they're
the justification that pickup artists take as to why they have their systems in place, why they hack the mainframe, like you said it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Every single thing that they believe, every trick and tip that they give for men to pick up women, all of the misogyny and the manipulation and all that stuff is justified or created from this root belief of hypergamy, the belief that women, especially, marry and mate upwards. They don't do it laterally, they don't go down, they go upwards. And everything that you talk about in a pickup artist community comes from this belief. So it's just very important to understanding them and why they do what they do and why they believe what they believe. You have to understand hypergamy first. So that's what we're doing. Um, so in some ways, hypergamy is like the secular red-pilled manosphere's justification for purity culture.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Hypergamy is the secular red-pilled manosphere's justification for purity culture.
All right. So what's that mean?
So if you're in a religious space, if you're a tradcon, if you're a Christian fundamentalist and you're in the red pill, purity culture means something, right? It means the fact that a woman should be pure, a woman should be virginal, a woman should be, all of those purity culture values that are placed on women are seen through a religious lens in the tradcon space. What you'll find out in this is that the PUAs also kind of believe in purity culture in kind of a weird way with women, and hypergamy is used as that justification for a woman to be pure and to be that kind of angelic, all that stuff. But they just put a different frame on it, and they say it's hypergamy. We'll get there. If it doesn't make sense right now, we'll get there. But I want to call that out right now that it's just purity culture showing up in a secular form rather than a religious form. So hypergamy is also, it provides a great example of the red pill manospheres framing misogyny and framing their behaviors through the lens of science and psychology. That's a big theme in here, is that there's a lot of pseudoscience and a lot of pseudo psychological justifications and reasons going on here for a lot of the beliefs in the red pill manosphere, and hypergamy is just a very pure, good example of that. So it's good to kind of study it and know there. I do want to make clear in this, I don't think it's valuable. We talked about this yesterday to debunk this idea. I do not want to be one of those debunking podcasts for hypergamy. You can go find one of those out there if they exist. I just don't think there's a lot of value in doing it because there's no need to do it. Like, this is an absurd enough worldview on its face that there's really no value trying to debunk it. And so I'm not going to. And debunking it is like the least interesting thing about this topic, right? What interests me more about hypergamy is how men are in search of like the one thing, right? How we fall for a lot of times, like that guy that comes out and goes, I got one tip, one trick. There's one thing that is at the root of all of the things you hate. And we as men, I think, like for some reason, nature or nurture, we like love this idea more than anything. The idea that just like we are seeking truth and we have found the one true thing that explains fucking everything. When in reality, reality is so much more complicated and so much more nuanced than that. But we as men kind of do this.
So if I can echo back, it sounds like knowing this tendency of men to look for that one solution, that one like answer that represents truth, represents behavior, represents basically a worldview that allows them to feel justified in whatever action they're seeking to take. That's the compelling thing. That tendency, that search, that clinging to whatever answer is given, as opposed to hypergamy as a belief system itself, which you don't want to debunk this podcast.
Yeah, I don't want. Yeah, there's. Yeah, does that make sense when I say there's no value in debunking it? It's like trying to debunk flat Earth theory in a way where it's like, why do I need to debunk this? This is already on its face, just like not something. Even if the idea is correct in hypergamy's case, where it's like hypergamy does exist, it's like it's such a limited factor in when the complex web of human romantic relationships that like the fact that they're reducing it all to just being about hypergamy is in and of itself like it's just ridiculous. That idea is so ridiculous. And I don't know, I'm always fascinated with men, and this was a case with me when I was growing up where like we take the very like natural human process of like figuring out who we are and identifying ourselves and developing core behaviors and developing a sense of identity, and we're told that that process is quote unquote seeking truth, that we are figuring out the way of the world, like does that make sense, like we are somehow seeking truth for what is a very just understandable process of just like finding your identity in what you believe, but we've got to make it like we've got to elevate it to something way bigger than it is. And so it's like, yeah, maybe these PUAs have found a way to, hack relationships and get more pussy than other guys, but like the way they talk about it and the way they feel about it and where they go to with it is always this kind of way where it's just like, this is absolute. This is 100%. This is the one thing that you need to know. And that just seems like a uniquely dude thing. Like we seem to like that more than I would say straight men. We seem to love that process and love that thing. And hypergamy, like what it is and studying it and understanding it and seeing where they go with it, just kind of like thematically fits with that in a way that I'm like, that's more interesting to talk about on a podcast than just
Focusing
hey,
on the
this
theory
thing,
itself.
that you think is stupid, it's stupid. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, go for it.
And I will, though, be giving as we go through like little pinpricks. I do think it is valuable to just like mini debunkings or mini like reminders throughout the episode that like this is really a nuanced thing. The way that they talk about hypergamy, we'll get to that section and what they believe it is. And it's going to seem very like absolutist and very like, very clear cut to them. But like it is valuable to know as I'm talking through the history of it and I'm talking through what it is, that just like, oh, it's a little more complicated than they're going to say. Oh, this doesn't mean exactly what they're going to say it means, that kind of thing. So you'll hear that coming through as well. I do think that is valuable. And also, I want to cite my sources real fast, just to let everybody know what I used to research this episode. I researched several Rollo Tomasi, who we'll get to him, lectures and podcasts on hypergamy. He's the main guy that come out with these like hypergamous theories in the red pill. He has really popularized this idea of hypergamy in this iteration in our society. So several of his lectures on hypergamy, several of his Q&A sessions, and I've gotten through about half of his book, The Rational Male, which that shit is a slog. Let me tell you, I tried to get through it all for this podcast. And then like halfway through, I was like, he just repeats himself all the time, whatever, fine. So I will finish that because we do need to do a full episode on The Rational Male at some point. But anything I'm talking about is coming from the first half of that book. Right. Questions so far, dude?
Well, there was one little tidbit you told me about our dear friend Rollo, who sounds like a convenience store candy, but he came up with a certain term that's at the core of our podcast, apparently.
Yeah, so he came up with the red pill. the red pill. Um, he popularized it. He calls himself the godfather of the red pill.
Mm.
So he's the one that's really he was one of the first people to this space and is one of the main players in this space. And it's also interesting because he kind of shies away from the limelight a little bit. So he, while there are other figures in here, like your Andrew Tates and your all those guys in the red pill, he kind of takes a back seat to a lot of this. He has his ideas and stuff, but he stays out of the limelight a little bit, as much as one can as a YouTuber and podcaster. He stays kind of out of the limelight. So it's interesting in that way. All right, so we've already defined this, but hypergamy, casually defined, refers to the practice of marrying or mating up rather than laterally or down. So this kind of up-down dynamic can be viewed in like a lot of different ways, but with the PUAs and in the red pill, we're talking mostly about financial hypergamy and status hypergamy. There are other forms of it, like educational hypergamy. There are people who prefer dating partners with a higher degree of education than them, and all those kinds of things can be described as hypergamous behaviors around dating. But when we talk here, we're talking mostly about financial and mostly about social status. So the red pill manosphere understands this up-down dynamic to be someone's sexual market value when compared to another's sexual market value within the context of the sexual marketplace. There, got some terms out
Oh,
for you.
Omaha, Omaha, a
Omaha.
sexual
Yeah, Omaha.
marketplace?
Omaha.
A
Yeah.
sexual marketplace.
So,
It's a marketplace?
yeah, right. So capitalism's in here. So
Huh.
hypergamy to a pickup artist in the red pill manosphere is seen as someone of lower sexual market value, preferring to date or mate with someone of higher sexual market value. So when they say hypergamy, that's what they specifically mean. Someone of lower sexual market value trying to get with somebody of higher sexual market value.
How dare
So
they?
let's define some terms here, right? Because we've thrown out two of them. It's good to know what they mean. The sexual marketplace, which they refer to, and I'll refer to here on out as SMP, refers to the social context in which individuals seek, compete for, and negotiate sexual or romantic partners. It's based on the idea that people possess varying levels of physical attractiveness and desirability, which influence their opportunities and outcomes in dating and relationships, right? So physical attractiveness, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? How you look. Desirability, though, kind of includes all the other stuff, right? So your financial resources, your personality traits, your social status, and even they say women are looking for people that are good parental candidates, right? So if a man seems like he'd be a good father, that increases his sexual market value overall. So in the sexual marketplace, right? So sexual marketplace covers all of those kind of behaviors. And one sexual market value, or I'll call it SMV from here on out, is a ranking of someone's attractiveness and desirability within the marketplace, often in a 1 to 10 scale. So your standard, like everybody, oh, that person's an 8, that person's a 9. Um, that's how they rank it in the sexual marketplace. Everyone's SMV is on a 1 to 10 scale. So, and again, when we're talking about sexual market value, we're not only talking about physical attractiveness. Someone can be a 5 in attractiveness and be a 9, have a 9 sexual market value if they are rich enough, have a good job, know the right people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Important to grasp those. Uh, Questions?
Well, whatever happened to tenderness and, being a good listener?
No, in this world, every human trait is reduced to a number
All
of
right.
some
Well,
sort in a graph on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. This is the world that we live in with these men. So what they believe also is that a woman's SMV, her value, peaks in her early 20s and is determined mainly by youth and beauty, right? So a woman is valued for her beauty and for her looks. So example, you got two women. Both are 7s in their physical attractiveness, just for shits and gigs. But the first woman is 20 years old, second woman's 40 years old. The younger woman will have a higher SMV, maybe 8 or 9, because of her youth, whereas the older one will have a lower SMV because of her geriatricness, 5 or 6
Ooh,
on there. So
Michael,
they
you
use
got
both of those.
oof. Yeah, so
I'm
this is
trying.
what they believe. So
Yeah,
Omaha.
Omaha, Omaha,
Okay.
Omaha,
It just
Omaha. I
made
swear to God.
yeah, you are gonna have to do that
You see where
several
my
times.
girlfriend, you see where my girlfriend yesterday was like, you
How
need
is she
to
doing with all the
preface this.
masculinity podcast, by the way? She supports you in this
Touch
search
and
into
go.
masculinity?
It's touch and go.
Okay.
She'll walk by and I'll be reading some like horrible thing and I'm like, hey, listen to what this guy thinks of this, and I'll read off the quote and she'll be like, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm desensitized to this shit now. Sorry. Yeah, but Omaha, and all of that. Men's SMV peaks later in their life. So they're in their mid 30s through to about 50. That's when their SMV peaks. It's determined mostly by their status, their wealth, their confidence, and other, personality traits, and their dominance over the world. So a more dominant man will have a higher value, according to them. So in short, what this worldview perpetuates is the idea that a woman is valued for how they look, while a man is valued for what they can provide, right? Which is just a relationship dynamic that seems super healthy for everyone involved. That's just great. We're off a great foot. I get cameo in this. So Paul Elam, he's a men's rights activist and definitely a future episode topic, takes this idea further by saying that women are valued for their youth and beauty and men are valued for their expendability. So what can be taken from them, right? If I can take financial resources, take their health and well-being, and in some cases take their lives, right? The government can take a man's life if they go to war. So men are valued for what can be taken from them. Women are valued for their youth and beauty. Again, super healthy for so
Yeah,
horrible.
I'm interested where that dude comes from and like, wow. Yeah,
He's I
that's
don't
a
want to get
worldview
derailed
that's
on him.
no, but like that's a
Yeah,
worldview.
and he's super blue collar and super um radical honesty in his way, like what he thinks he's telling the truth. He thinks he's giving everybody straight. And so it's like he's weird. Anyway, cut all that. We have to do a future topic on him. I can't get into him now. Um so Nathaniel, how does the idea of sexual marketplace and sexual market value feel to you? In your lived experience on the planet Earth, like are men valued more for what they can provide? And like if so, is that fair? How do you feel?
Well, it's interesting because like there's truths in what you say. It's just like it puts kind of like this dogmatic system around it that makes it feel icky. But people are attracted to people they find attractive. The more attractive, the more compelled you are to pursue, I would say. In terms of the age thing, I can say 20-year-olds look like children to me. So that doesn't, equate. But I do think that attractability for dudes, at least in my case, seems to be like it's a crowdsourced, like more popularity thing now than it was previously. Although I was married for a long time, so I don't really have a barometer to gauge on. I am not rich. I am going paycheck to paycheck. So I can't provide, but I do have stability. I do have grounding in. So I don't know is the long answer. Like, I don't know. How do you feel?
On like on a societal level, I feel like this is generally true. I feel like women are valued for their youth and their beauty. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's necessarily what I believe, but I'm saying that it does feel right on a society level that that's how we view women. It also feels right that on a society level, we view men for being a good provider. The more that they can provide to you, the more that the more they are valued in a relationship. I
I guess
wouldn't
there
take it.
is like security and comfort and stability and all that. Like it doesn't only come down to financial. It does come to also at a
Well, it's
certain
what that
age,
finances
guys.
can provide, right? Right.
Well,
The
it's what
finances can
finances can
provide
provide,
stability, right?
but you can also do that with like, just being a person who's worked through a certain life period and handles their shit.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. 100%. Like I don't take it anywhere near the place of like Paul Elam by saying men are, valued for what can be taken from them. That's resentment. Um, but does it generally feel true? Yeah, I think it feels true totally. So I'm like in this weird place where like I don't immediately reject the idea that this is the dynamic that's going on. Like I do feel like there's a general like society level truth on it, and also like your personal experience does not align like with this very much, and that's not saying it wouldn't have been true, but you were married for most of the time and for most of like your early 20s and 30s, so like it's not something that might necessarily have crossed your path, this whole thing. I do. What I haven't talked about on this podcast is my divorce at all, and that's been somewhat strategic. I told you yesterday because I'm like, I think there's an episode on like my divorce, like fully. Um, but like the teaser that I'll give is like I was very aware that at the age of like 35, 36, that my, if you want to use their terms, sexual market value like shot way up. Like I did not have, for in my experience, using their language, I don't think I had a very high sexual market value in my 20s and my early 30s. I think I had a normal one. But when I hit 35, I started noticing there was a whole other like of women that would pay more attention to me, and that was interesting and it was weird. And like long story short, led to infidelity on my part because not being able to handle that kind of rise, right? Not knowing that like not knowing that it was going to happen, and also like not knowing what to do once it did. And also marital problems in general at the time, all led into this kind of thing, and I can see the truth in what they're saying because I was like, ooh, I got attention from women in a way that I've never gotten attention before, right about the age of 35.
Hmm.
And that attention has carried through. Like I get more attention now from women in that kind of way than I ever have before. Um, and the only thing that's changed is my age. And so I'm in this weird place where I'm like, oh, yeah, all that seems true. Um, and then kind of feeling bad for that seeming true, comes into it and being like, what does that mean for feeling true? And also kind of like motivating the reasons for this podcast a little bit, where it's like, okay, like the things they say are happening have happened, but I still don't understand how they get to where they get with it. Um, and so kind of exploring that kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I was exactly like their what they say is the way the world works is exactly matching my experience, but I still think they're rubbish. So
Yeah, I
anyway,
think that you touch on something right there, which is like we're in here to investigate from a place of trying to understand, trying to empathize, not necessarily agree. And then certain things cross over where it's like, yeah, it feels true and is borne out. And it's just about where that data kind of leads to and in terms of behavior and, uh, how people treat people really at the core of it. But like, kind of like just asking the questions, exploring these topics, and being willing to admit when something from the side we presume we might be not aligned with feels aligned. It's just like that's part of the journey, you know?
yeah, 100%. Yeah, so it's like it's weird because they'll say things like, you know, women are viewed for their beauty and their youth, and I'll go, oh, yeah, that kind of matches like what I think society is at. Um, and like, but then the liberal alarm goes off in my head. Like I call it the liberal alarm,
Yeah.
where it's like I say something and I'm like, oh, that's not true. Like that's not 100% true. But like the alarm's going off in my head, and there's like a dissonance between like my lived experience and like what I believe to be like actually going on, and the
Well, you're trying
reconciling of
to
those two.
you're trying to be a good Democrat, but like certain things are kind of feeling true that you didn't expect. Like,
What's
like it's a cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, do you know Neil Brennan, the
No.
comedian, where he said the difference between liberals and conservatives is like if you're a conservative and you walk up to a group of conservatives and you go, "Hey, I'm conservative," and they go, "Hey, yeah, come on over," and then if you are liberal and you walk up to a group of liberals and you go, "Hey, I'm liberal," they'll look at you and they'll go, "We'll see," you know. And
Yeah.
so it's like, so part of me is like admitting that is like, oh no, the "we'll see" people. What are they gonna think?
Yeah,
But I don't know,
fair.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Also, one thing I'll push back on, I think you had a high sexual market value. I don't remember you being without pussy for a while. Like I think you went from relationship to relationship pretty
I think I was a
pretty
serial
swiftly.
monogamist. I think I was a serial monogamist in my at
Mm.
that point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a difference between. I was not a pickup artist.
No, you were not a pickup artist. You
No.
did like tend to find relationships as opposed to, like more fleeting things, at least from the outside is what it seemed like. But
Yeah.
like I knew your partners and I heard wonderful things about your prowess. So, I think that you're
Oh,
just fine. I think you're just
cut
fine.
that shit. I want to know what the fuck you heard. Okay, well, that's off pod. Off pod. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know where to go from that. um. Okay. Anything else though on this? 'Cause we're going to move into the history of it, like where hypergamy came from, how it's used, kind of understood modernly before Rollo, and then kind of go into Rollo. But it's any questions or anything from here?
No, go for it.
All right, dude. So the term hypergamy was first used all the way back in 1881, and it was in a book called The Punjab Castes by Sir Denzil Ibbotson, which I did not read at
Can
all.
you can
Uh,
you repeat those words one more time just so we can enjoy the sound of these consonants and vowels, please?
it's a book called The Punjab Castes by Sir Denzil Ibbotson. And it is a book, it's a colonial British book, and it's based off of census data from certain areas of India. And it's just census data, is all it is. But it does have an anecdote in there, kind of talking about the Hindu tradition of arranged marriages and describing the preference for some men to have their daughters married to people in a higher caste than them. So they're in a lower caste and they're trying to get their daughters married into a higher caste, ultimately raising their status, right?
Okay.
The interesting thing about hypergamy, I feel like, is that not only is it like trying to get superior, but you're also kind of tacitly admitting that you're inferior. Like if you're trying to go after somebody who's superior, like you're thinking that you are inferior, which is like just a weird psychology dynamic. I think when people have hypergamy, but yeah, so
Also,
that it
there's the fact that men are driving this behavior. It's not the child brides that
bingo,
are. Yeah. So,
bingo. Yeah, to use like you have my fucking outline open. Yeah, that's
nope.
exactly the thing is that this is first used to describe a man's behavior of raising his own status rather than a feminine behavior that the pickup artists and the red pill um, kind of say that it is. And that's like little pinprick debunking number one right there, right? Is that this was never used originally to describe any kind of behavior of a woman. It was all about behavior of men trying to raise their own status. Um, and also, so hypergamy in modern times, right? Fast forward to like today, like if you believe in this pickup artist version of hypergamy, again, they say all women, right? What they mean is heterosexual cisgender women, but they say all women. And so it would stand to believe like, okay, well, if it's all women, it should happen everywhere. And in reality, what there is actually there are societies like China that are way more hypergamous than the United States of America is. Like we have hypergamy, they got hypergamy on steroids. And it's coming from a certain amount of factors like the one child policy in China, coupled with China allowed sex selective abortions. So you could find out the sex of your child and then decide if you wanted to have an abortion or not based off of that information in China. So patriarchal society in China plus one child policy plus sex selective abortions, what that's led to is a gap. There's way more men in China than there are in women. Right? People prefer male babies, but it means that women are now in a position, if you want to keep the capitalism market going, right? They're a scarce resource. There are way more men than there are women. So women can afford to be way more selective about who they choose to date and get into a marriage with. So the preference that women have for dating up and marrying up comes mostly from the fact that, like, just on economies of scale, like, they have the power to demand that kind of thing. And then there are other societies like the UK, where hypergamy data is like non-existent. Women display preferences for marrying and getting into relationships with people of equal status and of equal financial means. So there's just no hypergamy, very little hypergamy there at all. So again, if the PUAs are going to say that this is something that is all women, like, then they should be able to show that this happens in all women equally. And so, pinprick number 2 there for real fast.
We need a sound effect for each of these pinpricks.
Pink, like that. Um,
Thanks.
yeah, so it just has more to do with place and time. Hypergamy has more to do with the place you're born in, the time that you're born in, and your circumstances than it does with some like biological or psychological like truth about the nature of a woman, right? Um, so I mean, and even in the US, uh, going back a couple years, like going back like 30, 40 years, like the 60s and 70s, women used to display preferences for men with higher education levels, right? So if a woman had a high school education, she'd want to marry somebody with a bachelor's degree. If she had a bachelor's degree, she was looking to marry somebody with a master's degree. But as the education gap closed, right? And now we're at the point even where there are more women enrolled in colleges and universities than men. So as that gap closed, so did their preference for, what do you call it? For educational hypergamy. That just simply hasn't been a thing for a while in women. Um, so all that having been said, hypergamy is flexible. It can change over time. It's not rigid. It's not locked in. It's not a principle that PUAs kind of think about that. And also, just interestingly enough, like as the wage gap continues to close, like the wage gap exists, right? But it is closing, maybe slower than we want it to, but it is closing. So as that closes, I mean, there's some kind of like anecdotal or just like little evidence to say like, if the education gap closed and therefore women's preference for hypergamy and education went down, if the wage gap closes, maybe women's preference for hypergamy is going to go down too. Which is again not what these...
can men provide if women insist on being equal?
Hey, look, I don't know how my girlfriend would ever know what to do in Tears of the Kingdom unless I was playing it right alongside her. Like, I have to be there to show her how to fight, like how Link can fight and how he can change outfits and stuff. Like,
but
how
once
how
she
gonna...
learns, once you give that information to her,
I'm just trying to prove my value.
Do you have? She's
I'm trying to prove
taken
my value. I know where all the outfits that you need to beat Tears of the Kingdom are. She doesn't.
Okay, well, I did pass a little graffiti on the sidewalk this morning, walking to the subway to work, that said, "Fashion is my passion." So it seems quite timely. So keep going.
There you go. Done. Also, in today's day and age, it's important to know that hypergamy is like heavily stigmatized, right? Hypergamy, like, not only, so the preference for women to date men with higher financial, higher financial stability, or higher incomes. There you go. The preference for women to date men of higher incomes exists in the United States right now, but also just as equally exists the fact that women don't want to be seen to be doing that. Right? Mm-hmm. They want a man with a higher income, but they don't want to be seen as trying to get a man with a higher income. Right? The gold digger.
Liars.
Right? Omaha. The gold diggers archetype is the thing, right? And so we all know the archetype of a gold digger, right? It's a young, attractive woman with an older, richer, more well-off, higher status man, right? And we're all kind of programmed to view this through the lens of the old guy is getting taken to the cleaners, right? She's just milking everything off of him. She doesn't really love him, and he's just completely, he's getting taken for a ride, and implying that she's there to leech off his resources, right? So it's just another way that we can put women in the role of a villain and the men in the role of a victim, right? We have all of that. So it's important to know that stereotype like while there is hypergamy, there is also social stigma of hypergamy. Yeah, okay, so it's important to know that like men engage in hypergamy, but it's just really more visible in women than it is in men. So like it's much more women can be a little bit more open and out front about it. So like have you heard of the 666 rule on
No.
Tinder? So it's a dating app strategy, and there are women making TikToks and talking about the 666 rule, where it's men with they will only swipe with men that have six-figure salaries, six-pack abs, and 6 feet tall. Right. That's their requirements, and it's the six-figure salary that you can kind of come hone in on as the hypergamous thing in there, and and so that preference exists, but it's important to know why that preference kind of exists. Um, fuck, cut that too. I we talked about this section kind of already naturally, so it feels weird to come back up with it again.
Well, I think one thing that you brought up yesterday, which that seemed to be leaning toward, is that men's sexual value changes over time, where in the early years, their sexual value is higher prioritized, the alpha value versus like the alpha fucks the beta bucks. So like, is that where you're going with this?
Not necessarily. Where I was going with this is so it's been moralized, it's been stigmatized, um, but like let me start again. Yeah, so it's been moralized. It's been stigmatized for women to be seen in that way. But really, what they're describing when they describe hypergamy is just human ambition, right? So there's a ambition for upward mobility that I think exists in all people, and women have been throughout history, they faced discrimination when it comes to access to the job market and access to professional marketplaces. And so this hypergamy can also be seen kind of as like an evolutionary like way around that oppression, right? So if you have a woman, there's a woman and she has no access to the job market, she has no access to, having better aspirations for herself. Well, she's going to use the means that are necessary, which is this hypergamous kind of thing, this gold digging kind of strategy. I'm not trying to say it's good, bad, right, wrong. I'm just trying to say it can be seen as a reaction to their oppression rather than some horrible evil thing at the center of nature,
I
the
also
center of
think
nature
like
of a woman.
another A word besides ambition is just attraction. Like if somebody you're really attracted to or somebody that has qualities that you respect, that you want in your life, whether it's, wealth, whether it's stability, whether it's whatever else like that, like it isn't always just a conscious thing to be like, ooh, I prefer that person to all the other people. It's just you're drawn to who you're drawn to. So there's like
Oh,
an
100.
innate factor to
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'm trying to bring up with this is more that, okay, look, when we frame ambition as a male thing, it's framed as good, right? So like, hey, Nathaniel, you got a job that pays you X amount of money, and then a year after you got that job, you decided to go for another job that was going to pay you more money, and so then you did, and you got that job, and then after a year of that, you got another job that paid you even more money, right? And we frame it that way as
And
male
then I got
ambition, like it
enough
seems
money
great.
and I
Yeah.
just went to an ashram and I just sit around all day talking to people and drinking fine tea. Winning.
There you go. There you
Winning.
go. Yeah, but when we describe feminine ambition, we describe it as gold digging, right? So the back in the day, the only way a woman could make sure that she had a higher income was to, marry or date a man with a higher income, and then after a while, date another man with another higher income. So this, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that behavior is observable in women. And so I'm just talking about modern, I'm just talking about studies and everything have shown that is a behavior that women do. And I'm just trying to say it can be looked at through the lens of ambition rather than the lens of being a horrible fucking person. Right? Men are choosing to put the label of this is horrible rather than look at it and go, hey, maybe women should have career opportunities. Maybe if they could have their own money and open their own bank accounts, they wouldn't need to like do this. And so it could be a leftover thing from there as well.
Just quick
I don't
notes,
know.
just quick, like out of that, you
Yeah.
said studies have shown it is kind of like an incendiary thing to say. So what were the things you were looking at that kind of shows that behavior? You said traditionally they were shut out of the job market, shut out of, certain autonomous ways of improving their
Oh, see,
standing in
this is why
society.
we might need to cut this section because, like, yes, I remember hearing like the different studies and shit because uh, I believe they are there, right? And but what data they're using, I can't quote offhand. So that's also the problem. I'm trying to like navigate like what I can actually say on this. Um, but like, but yeah, what there are is like hypergamy is an observable behavior traditionally in women. It is like there's enough research and enough literature um, that shows the behavior exists. What it doesn't show is why the behavior exists. What it doesn't tell is it good or bad. What I'm trying to say is like there's a behavior that we know is there, and the behavior is neutral. The behavior
So
is a reaction to a bunch of different things. What the PUAs do is moralize it, and they say, "Hey, this behavior shows the evilness of women," and
I
there's even a stigma around it, right?
I get all that. What I think like is the one thing that, and it can just be kind of referenced and moved on from, is you're saying there's references, there's studies, it's observable behavior, and I know you can't like point to exact titles of articles or whatever else like that, but I think it's important not to gloss over that part when you say it's observable behavior, it's proven. Like at least say some of the effect of like why you have that takeaway. It's like look through things people can look up, like and dig into this research as they want. Like I myself, like learn this from it. We're not going to go into that here. What we're going to is like this behavior shows up
Well, I think it
and
matches
it's
up. I think it can match up with my. It definitely aligns with like my personal experience of women the women I've talked to, and you talk about like what do you look for in a man? Money comes up most of the time. Where when I talk to guy friends about what do you look for in a woman, money is nowhere on there, right?
sure.
And I think that I think there's enough people who have shared that experience to be like, okay, yeah, this is something. This is something. What I don't want to get into in this podcast is how much of a thing actually is it? It doesn't matter how much of a thing it is. I don't think this is necessarily a bad behavior. I don't care. If a woman wants to go and put a high on her list that she wants a man with a certain income and it has to be that, fucking fine. Everyone's allowed to go pursue happiness in whatever way that is. And relationships that are like hit that kind of quote unquote gold digger like stereotype, like there is a version of that relationship that is transactional, where like the old man knows he's being used for his money and his wealth and his resources and his status, and the younger woman kind of knows that she is being used for her youth and beauty. I don't know why I'm picturing Bill Belichick and his girlfriend right now, right? Do you know Do you know this?
Well, I know the coach, but I don't know his girlfriend.
Yeah, his girlfriend's like 24 years old and like a sorority cheerleader. Kind of, I don't know too much about like like her as a person, but like he's like a 75-year-old man, right? And so like I just think like there's a world in which Bill Belichick knows that she's using him for this, and she knows that Bill Belichick knows that, and she knows also that she's being used because she's 24 and hot, and they're both fucking okay with it. Yeah.
Or maybe they're in love, maybe they're in
Yeah, man.
love. Who
Yeah, yeah.
knows?
There exists a world in which they're in love, 100%. There exists a world in which she is being deceptive and just completely using him, and he's a stupid fool cuck, and he doesn't know what's going on. But there's a wide swath in between that is something like she kind of knows, he kind of knows. They they're just both cool with it, and that it feels weird to stigmatize because that's a transactional view of love, and is it necessarily the healthiest for like both of them? Maybe, maybe not. You can get into like talking about that. That doesn't matter to me. My point is like that's not hurtful. If they both know what's going on and they're both kind of okay with it, then I mean, show me the victim and I'll show you the crime. There's
Yeah.
no victim there.
What you're talking about
Um,
actually reminds me of this one quick moment in the show Succession. I don't know if you ever watched it on HBO. It was a
Yes, I
huge,
loved it.
yeah. That one moment where the oldest son, from the previous marriage of Brian Cox, is getting married on a boat, and his wife basically, like admits like, I don't, I don't love
Yeah, I remember
you,
this.
and I'm just like, I really am here for your money, and he's like, I know. I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
because I like your company, I'd rather be with you than not. And
yeah,
it's like,
100%. Or White Lotus season 1 with uh oh, I forget her name. Dadigrio, whatever her name is, that actress who was she just got married to the guy who
right.
who
Yep.
yeah, spoiler alert. And she was like, I have to, at one point was like, I can't be part of this because I don't love you. I'm only here for the money, kind of thing. And she leaves. And at the end of the whole thing, again, spoiler alert for season 1, she comes back to him. She chooses like the money is more important to me than the strength of this relationship. And I mean, this is outside the focus of this episode, but like I don't fucking care. That seems okay to me in some way, shape, or form. People get into relationships for all different kind of strategic reasons. Some of which are based around the other person and being a team, and some of which are personally motivated. And the older I get, I just don't fucking care. Like that kind of stuff. As long as nobody's hurting each other, who cares? And so there exists a world in which like hypergamy is power neutral on that kind of thing, right? They're both getting something out of this world where the PUAs take it to the point of she is being a leech off of you. She is dominating over you because of this hypergamy when it's like, that's not necessarily the case. I disagree with that premise.
I get you.
That's kind of what I was trying to get out here.
Yeah.
Oh, I had this point on here. Okay. Yeah. Finishing up this last one. Yeah. So hypergamy can exist on a power neutral plane, and PUAs try to put it in a dom sub lens, right? One person's being dominant, the other person's being submissive, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, I would kind of maybe make the argument to PUAs or the critique to PUAs that like it's the putting on of that dom sub lens that's the problem. Right. The fact that you're choosing to put this type of lens onto a neutral topic is what leads you down this dark side. And that's also a common theme in the red pill manosphere, right? Where they choose to put some kind of dominant, submissive, winner, loser, winner cuck type of dichotomy on everything that isn't there. Does not need to be there. They're manufacturing it. And I think that's a thing to call out in the red pill manosphere as general. It's like a theme that I'm seeing a lot in a lot of their content and a lot of their people. So, all right, you can cut that in, move that wherever it needs to go. I think that's a good point. So the red pill manosphere, how does hypergamy show up in PUAs? We've talked about the history. We've talked about all that stuff. So now let's talk about Rollo Tomasi. Nathaniel, have you ever heard that name before I used it to you a couple days ago?
No.
All right. So Rollo Tomasi, that is not his real name. His real name is George W. Miller, which I like the Rollo change. I think it's cooler. He was born on April 2nd, 1969. So he's Gen X, and he definitely has big Gen X energy. The dressing in all black, the leather jacket, doesn't give a fuck kind of like version of a Gen X man that I think was like, I feel like is Woodstock 1999. Like
I've been thinking a lot
kind of
about
feels
that
like
actually, is like all the rage white dude, half rock, half grunge, half rap, like Limp Bizkit era.
Yeah. I
Like
mean the era we grew up in.
The era we grew up in, but like, definitely looking at Woodstock 99, like there's this documentary out there called Dark Side of the 90s, and just watching that, I'm like, of course MAGA happened, because all these 20-year-olds and teenagers became 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, and it never went away. Like
And Gen X is always, it seems like they always say fuck the system. That's the big Gen X quote I can think of in my mind, like to describe them. They're like, fuck the system, and they won't engage with the system. They're not like we haven't had a Gen X president. We went from boomer. We've been having boomers so many times. Like we haven't had a Gen X like political leader, and I just feel like their resentment towards that kind of like just kind of is interesting. Um, Anyway, so George Miller is very big Gen X energy. He's like the 50-year-old Gen X guy now. He worked as a guitarist in Southern California for a long time, especially back in the late 80s and early 90s. He described himself as a working musician, so he was not like the guy in a band trying to make it big, although I'm sure he had those experiences. He was more the somebody needs a guitarist for a recording session, so he went down and was, the guitarist for some other kind of artist. So that's how he made his money. And he was a semi-influential pickup artist at the time. So he comes into pickup artistry in the late 80s, early 90s, which, if you remember from our episode on the game, is the Ross Jeffries era. So using a lot of neuro-linguistic programming, which is kind of a pseudo-psychological techniques, to do what he called speed seduction. So get women to sleep with him as fast as possible. George, or Rollo, kind of comes up during that time and eventually kind of rises to the level he was at, alongside Mystery and Neil Strauss. So in that era as well. If you remember, Mystery's big thing was social dynamics, where he had a bunch of canned routines and openers and negs, and peacocking was big with him and that kind of thing. So that Rollo and all him are kind of all in that same class of pickup artistry.
Did he live in the same house where Courtney Love came to stay?
He's in Southern California. He's in LA during like the time leading up to Project Hollywood, the Project Hollywood house with Mystery. But I didn't see anything to say that he was in that house or doing that thing. Okay. But I really want him to be in the movie. In my mind, he is.
In the movie in my mind, he dates Courtney Love.
Yeah, yeah. So he's he returns to college eventually. He kind of gets sick of the pickup artist life, and he gets his degree in his 30s in psychology. And so he kind of, through his degree in psychology and like his experience in life as a pickup artist, really starts to become kind of a big theorizer. Like, he's the brain trust of the red pill manosphere. I mentioned before, he's called himself the godfather of the red pill. So he began posting copiously on the forum called So Suave, which is still active today. It's a very old pickup artist forum. Just does a lot of posting on different theories of pickup artistry and that kind of stuff. And he started his own blog called The Rational Male in 2011, and actually published in 2013 a long collection of his blog posts, kind of retooled to kind of make more sense as like a book. In 2013, that's the one I'm slogging through right now. He has 223,000 subscribers on YouTube, so he's pretty good presence on there as well. And he's actually published a series of Rational Male books, like Rational Male and like on a specific topic. My favorite one was Rational Male on Preventative Medicine. which I thought that was funny. He also has one called The Rational Male on Positive Masculinity, which part of this podcast, Nathaniel, you and I have been kind of talking about the idea of like what is a positive masculinity. And look, Rollo,
he's figured it out.
He had it right here already. So he beat us to it.
We're irrelevant.
It may be interesting for you to might be interesting to note for you that his version of positive masculinity looks nothing like our version of positive masculinity. So,
I thought you were going to say that I embodied his version of positive masculinity.
Oh, hell no.
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 Okay. All right.
I've only listened to one like seminar that he gave on positive masculinity, so I'm not like fully clear on what it is yet, but I can tell you this, I don't agree with it. So Rollo, he agrees with this modern definition of hypergamy, right? This kind of casually defined marrying up or dating up kind of nature of women. But he adds his own spin on it, which is it's a dual-natured process. So hypergamy to Rollo is a yin-yang type of dynamic where it's a balance, and women are constantly trying to balance between two competing priorities when it comes to dating and mating. Um, so this dynamic plays out on two different time cycles. It plays out over the course of a woman's life in the sexual marketplace, and it plays out also on a monthly um, dynamic. Like she will constantly be cycling through these uh, two different sides of hypergamy on a monthly scale, which she might already be ahead of me and know that if it's a
This is
monthly
what
thing,
got me into
it,
trouble with
yeah.
everybody in my theater collective.
Yeah,
Actually, people engage quite well with it,
tracking women's
actually.
periods. That's what he's doing. He's
Yeah.
tracking their periods. He knows. Okay,
Thank you
so
again, by the way. Thank you again for having
Rolo,
me
we'll
go
get to
out
that
that
in a
way.
second, but I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
say
yeah.
Rolo knows a lot about women's periods. And so every time I thought back to like a woman who would be like, men need to know more about a woman's menstrual cycle. I'm like, you get what you fucking asked for, ladies. Like maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want us to know anything. Because when we know, we're pretty weird about it. So I think this is a good time. Nathaniel, will you please tell us the assignment I
Yeah.
gave you?
All right.
And I did it
Well,
myself
to be
too.
fair, you did. I didn't hear about your discoveries. Okay, cool.
It wasn't too much.
So basically, you wrote me and said, "So I just discovered this thing, um, and it says that during certain periods of a woman's menstrual cycle, she's attracted more to alpha men who would dominate her, versus other times when she's more attracted to beta men." And I asked this of my girlfriend, and she looked at me crazy. So I want you to ask yours. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll do you one better. I'm going to a theater collective thing tonight. Maybe I just stand up, make an announcement that I have a thing to disprove about a belief from the red pill manosphere, and talk to me at the pub afterward. So a lot of people talk to me at the pub. And the first thing, just to harken back to careful of what you ask for, is they informed me that the question was inherently flawed because it split the menstrual cycle into two periods, the first 14 days and the second 14 days. And fierce debate ensued with one person in particular, letting me know that it's actually 4 parts to the cycle. And then I just, without having any contributions to the debate, watched this person debate what exactly the duration of those days are. You know, one through. I don't even remember, but so the question was flawed in terms of like 2 dual cycles, but more or less it was kind of interesting because it wasn't immediately debunked. A lot of people found certain bits of truth in it. One person said that she's found herself more attracted to alpha men who are more dominant and burly as she's gotten older and more like close to the, you know, age where she'll no longer be able to have kids. She all of a sudden found herself gravitating more toward that. Another person said that that she is attracted to kind of the quote unquote beta male type, the more feminine, softer, gentler male all the time. But during certain periods of her menstrual cycle, she's also attracted to more dominant alpha male men. So it expands the scope of who she's attracted to. Another person said that I'm bi. I'm always attracted to girly men. I never really am attracted to alpha men. So like it went a whole range across it. But it was funny because there wasn't really an outright no. It wasn't like this is such a misogynist point of view. How dare you ask this question or anything? I was expecting that. Never happened. It was a lot of interesting conversation that sprung from just the question.
Yeah. So let me go back and fill in the gaps here because I don't think we talked about alpha beta with Rolo. So what he does is he says the 2 different cycles of hypergamy are, one is called alpha fucks, and the other is called beta bucks. So again, Omaha on this. So women have natural alpha phases and natural beta phases. So monthly that plays out to being the first 14 days and the last 14 days of a woman's cycle. And over the course of her life, she is in an alpha fucks phase from about ages 18 to 27, 28. And then she transitions to a beta bucks phase. So she is constantly cycling through these things. And yeah, my experience also was when I asked women, like, is this true? What I thought I was going to get is absolutely not. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. But they did say, like, anecdotally specific to them, right? N of one studies, right? Say that like there was a little bit of truth that they change who their attractiveness is based off of whatever. Now, does that mean necessarily that it's coordinated with their hormone levels in their menstrual cycle? I have no idea, but I do feel like this it's indicative of what I see a lot of in this hypergamy and also in the reptile manosphere, where people go, kinda, you know, like that's the approach they always take when they kind of hear just like the basic what they believe before they hear where it goes. They hear the what it is and they go, kinda. Um, I don't know what that means. I think what it probably means is that everybody's fucking different and it's a lot more complex than you think it is. Which kind of goes against again their simplicity that they put on all this. So, this dual nature of hypergamy is rooted in a female mating strategy called strategic pluralism. I don't. Have you ever heard of that, Nathaniel? I
No.
don't know why you would have. Yeah. Okay. So strategic pluralism is a theory on how women find partners, and it goes and says that women are looking for a partner that is both genetically attractive to them, I like what they can see, their features, that kind of shit, and also like stability for them. So will somebody kind of like take care of them? So they're constantly looking for somebody that is hot and rich. Right? This is the Christian Grey theory of a woman's who a woman is attracted to. And so Rollo says, aha, that's proof that this means that women have this hypergamous nature that has an alpha fucks and a beta bucks side to it. I did try to look up and debunk strategic pluralism. I was like, what is this bullshit? Like sometimes the things they say are just like blatantly not true. And I couldn't find anything that says this is like horrible. This is like not a theory. It like actually was proposed by a couple of professors of psychology at actual universities, University of New Mexico, University of Texas A&M, and but it is just their theory, and they're very limited in what they say. They're like the study we did observed this behavior. That's it.
Hmm.
Right? They're very scientific when they say like they're very
When
limiting
were
on
those
like
studies done?
80s.
Huh.
So it was very much like, hey, this is something that we observed in these studies. Don't know what it means. Don't know anything. Have fun with it. That's what they kind of did. Rollo picks this thing. And this is another red pill thing where, like, when they go into pseudoscience and they go into pseudo psychology, what they do is they find something, an idea that's obscure enough that the average person isn't going to go, hasn't heard of it, and isn't going to go looking for it and fact check them on it. But also, like, like actually like creditable enough as an actual thing so you can't go in there and say like, oh my god, this is some quack psychologist from go fuck yourself university who did a study, that kind of, like it's not immediately disprovable what it is. More or less what it is it is a thing that one group of people have noticed, and that is it. But they take that and they go, proof of everything I believe. And I'm like, wow, okay. So Rollo sees this and goes, this is the strategic pluralism is why hypergamy is a dual process. So it's also a subconscious thing to Rollo. Rollo is very clear that this is a subconscious behavior and subconscious things that women are wanting that they don't even know about. And again, which is just fucking brilliant for him because like even if there is a woman who did say like nah this doesn't match my experience, he can just go ahead and say, well, you wouldn't know about it because it's subconscious. So it's just a way of like cutting women's own experience out of like your worldview. Like he's cleverly cut women out by saying that it's subconscious. So during the alpha fucks phase, right, that is either day 1 through 14 of her menstrual cycle or ages, and in general, ages 18 to 28 years old. She is concerned with alpha fucks, and it is a short-term breeding, as the name might include. So I also think it's important at this point. So when Rollo says alpha and beta, what I thought he would mean is like that alpha wolf kind of thing and like that beta cuck kind of thing. He does not mean that. He puts it in he says that these are just groups of categories. There is not a judgment on these as good or bad, which is why like in the red pill when you hear like alphas, most of the time you're hearing like something you want to be, and when you hear beta, something you want to avoid. Rollo says you need both, and he just used alpha and beta, I guess, as unfortunate placeholders before they became popularly known how they are today. But so when he says alpha and he says beta, he is not saying good bad. He is saying group A, group B. Okay, you think about it like that. So in the alpha fuck side, she is looking for alphas. Alphas are men with masculine features, strong jawline, broad shoulders, tall, deep voice, etc. That kind of what you'd associate with how alpha the term grew into, right? Also, that women prefer mating with men at this time that show high degrees of arrogance, confidence, and a controlling nature. Um, and this gets into an idea they call the dark triad man. So, have you heard of dark triad men?
No, but it's just all making me think of somebody I cross paths with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, dark triad man. Again, great band name. But it's men who are characterized by self-centeredness, manipulative behavior, and a lack of empathy, i.e., narcissists, Machiavellians, and sociopaths. He says that women during the first half of their cycle are attracted to narcissistic sociopaths, and in general, from the age of 18-29. They like the bad boy, right? They like the Christian Grey. They like those types of people in those areas of their life. So also, um, he says that you can tell a woman is in her alpha fucks phase if she starts wanting to have girls' nights out, which I think is really funny. Like that's the proof. If they want to have a girls' night out, I mean, she wants to go window shopping for somebody else. So it's like unconsciously women will prefer girls' nights out like during the first half of their menstrual cycles. Um, and uh, he's big into what he calls shit tests and what the PUAs call shit tests, which are women, when they're in their alpha phase, will uh, give men shit in various ways, in all the kind of stuff, in order to make them prove their dominance over her. So when she voices an objection to something or says she's not going to do something or doesn't want to do something or whatever, that is not her expressing a boundary. Like, no, I don't want to go out tonight, or no, I don't want to do this with you. It is a thing that you need to go reassert your dominance over her. Which I think is just a dynamic that can get real dangerous real fast. Um, but so he constantly sees the world with women as like them constantly giving shit tests, which you constantly have to show your dominance over. So let's go second phase, day 14 through 28 of a woman's menstrual cycle, and in general, 29 years old and above. The woman is in her beta bucks phase. So this is a phase where she's more concerned with long-term safety, long-term breeding priorities, emotional security, financial stability. A woman will be attracted to men with feminine features, so soft jawlines, dad bods, etc. She will prefer men who give her emotional comfort and men who score high on like for parental potential, right? She thinks the man would be a good father. She'd be more attracted to him and want to breed with him during this phase. Beta men, Rollo does see beta men somewhat as cucks, but not because the behavior itself is a cuck. It's because they're dating women who are past their prime, so to speak, right? So once a woman becomes attracted to a beta, she is past her sexual market value peak, and therefore these betas are getting a bad deal on a woman, right? Omaha, Omaha, Omaha.
Yeah.
um, so, uh, so this hypergamous duality, right? This alpha fucks, beta bucks side can advantages women by allowing them to, what Rollo says, calls confusing paternity, right? So, in Rollo's worldview, men have a deeply masculine desire for certainty of paternity. That's the one thing men are absolutely concerned about in dating and relationships to Rollo.
What does that mean?
And it's also, say it again.
What does that mean? Certainty of paternity?
They need to know that the children the children are their own.
That's what I thought you meant, but you said like in dating as a more casual phase or something. But you're talking about just like it's domination, knowing that the woman is yours, basically.
No. So women are always hypergamy tries to confuse paternity. That's Rollo's argument. And men have a desire for certainty of paternity, right? They're always looking for that. So if they're going to have children, they want to make sure that the child is theirs. So when they're getting into a relationship with a woman, right, they're kind of, if they're having a relationship with a woman, that's the one thing that they want to know is that the woman is theirs. So yeah, I guess in a way you can be used to justify like ownership over a woman, but they have so many other ways to justify that in their mind. This is more about knowing if a child is yours or not. And ironically for Rollo, this is the one thing that men can never have. Right. It's the one thing men want over everything. It's also the one thing they can never have because there is no way before DNA tests, right, to 100% certainly know that a woman is carrying your child. Right. So men have this nature going back and forth where they want the one thing that they can't have. I would step in here and say, like, not all men want that. Like, I do not want children. I don't want any paternity. I never have, and I probably never will. So, like, already off the bat, I'm like, I think your theory has some holes, but this is what he is saying. So he said that patriarchal systems were invented to ensure paternity, right? The reason the patriarchy existed is as a check on hypergamy so that men can know that their children are their own.
He's drawing a whole lot of inferences.
I see your face
basically.
deep in thought, and I'm wondering what you're thinking.
I'm just following along, trying to figure out the ways in which he lands at the ironclad concepts.
The logic starts to take jumps right now, right? Like we're starting to jump off of this idea of hypergamy as a neutral kind of societally noticeable phenomenon to like, okay, we're backflipping ourselves into misogyny here, right? You can kind of see like, oh, I see where we're going. It's kind of like when you hear like a conspiracy theory and somebody starts talking about conspiracies and you're like, we're about 10 minutes away from the Jews. I know we're about 10 minutes away from the Jews. Like that's where we are right now with this. It's like we're about 10 minutes away from some real hardcore misogyny. And you're right.
Okay.
But you see like how he's getting there, right? I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying you see like the steps he's taking. If you believe that men really only want to know their children, the children are theirs, then they are going to invent systems like a patriarchy, which does kind of which controls women and allows as much certainty for a man, right? In the to know that child is his. So it's natural to assume that the patriarchy was just there as a check on hypergamy. And now we can kind of start going into maybe the patriarchy isn't that bad. If you can believe that the patriarchy is there to protect men, maybe it's not that bad, right? That's spoiler alert. That's where we're going.
Okay. So this is going one step beyond Omaha. This is full on Nebraska.
Yeah, okay. This is the entire state of Nebraska. Yeah. Again, I do not believe any of this at all, but sorry, I'm a straight white dude that's got to talk like this. It's got to sound like that, like I'm saying I like it. But so in modern times, like post-sexual revolution, like from the advent of birth control through the sexual revolution, Rollo believes that women have used hypergamy as an end around their desire to fuck alphas and then have betas raise their children. Right. So what he thinks is that a woman is now free to fuck as many alphas as she wants without the fear of there being any stigma or backlash to her behavior. Right. And also to confuse paternity for betas. So a woman in her early 20s is going to go off and fuck all these alphas, right? She might be a single mother at that point because the alpha is never going to want to marry her. The alpha is going to leave her with a kid. So now she's got a kid, which decreases her sexual market value. So she turns 29, goes past her prime, has one kid, and suddenly nobody wants her. She's so low value. So what she needs to do is convince some unsuspecting beta that it doesn't matter who the father is, quote unquote. You're going to love this children as your own, quote unquote. Right? You're the good man for doing this. This is her deceptively tricking a man into loving her past her prime. Right. And the patriarchy solved all this because women's behavior was much more. There were consequences for behavior. There were consequences for the alpha fuck side, right? The patriarchy was trying to curb the woman's alpha fuck side and keep her in marriages and in these kind of patriarchal institutions over here. And that was a good thing because look what it does. It makes these beta men cucks. And isn't that horrible? Right?
This might be the most like down the funnel rabbit hole that, like you've talked through these different things in the manosphere. This is the first time we've kind of like gone through the logic spiral that, like just takes you further down. So good on you. Keep going.
Does it, again, Omaha. But does it make sense, like how they're getting there?
I think the question is flawed. Do I see how they're connecting these points? Yes.
Yeah. I'm not saying how you get there. I'm saying that you see how they're tricking themselves and radicalizing themselves with this logic, right? I to bring it back to the focus of the podcast, I think it's important to understand how they get to these thoughts because that's the first step in trying to talk them out of it.
It seems
right?
like a doom spiral. It seems like lashing out, grabbing onto anything that says like, and also this and this and this and this,
Yeah, exactly. But like it all stems back to hypergamy, right? You have to believe that women are hypergamous, which you have to believe in the dual nature of a woman, right? In order to get here. So the behavior, the thoughts and the logic is all rooted in some deep misogynistic beliefs on the dual nature of a woman, right? And so they are taking that and they're using it and they're backflipping themselves back into misogyny with it. They go, the solution is the patriarchy, right? And it's like, you started from a patriarchal place. Of course, you're going to backflip yourself into logic that the patriarchy is good because you already believe that. So they're taking their presupposed beliefs and creating entire logic structures to get them back to where they already fucking were. And it's like, I'd rather you just be an open misogynist than do this and make me try to think that you're actually good. Anyway, off my soapbox there. So, I'm going out of my notes where I am. Oh, and the other horrible thing about this, in their opinion, Omaha, is that like the beta that's waiting for the woman when she cashes out of the sexual marketplace at 29 and is quote unquote, valueless. The horrible thing, what she's doing to that beta is she's locking him down just before his sexual market peak. So she locks him down at 30, and then at 35, he was going to have so many more options, right? But she needs to get to him then because he's undervalued at that point, right? She's getting a good deal on a good provider at that point. In 5 years, she ain't going to be able to afford that guy. So the woman's duplicitous nature means that she's like constantly trying to lock a man down, right? So example. And I think we've already covered this enough, but just to hit it home a little bit further, what they're doing. So imagine a scenario where like you're at a used car lot, okay? And the salesperson sells you a vehicle by telling you that you're getting a great deal on this vehicle, right? But what they also fail to mention is that the car that you're going to buy is scheduled to be price reduced by 50% at the end of the day. So they just admit telling you that. So you buy it for $10,000 when it was going to be $5,000 at the end of the day, right? To Rollo, this is what a 29-year-old woman is doing to a beta man, right? This is what they're doing. They're selling them. They're being deceptive in this way. Now, example, let's take it to absurdity just to kind of illustrate the point, right? Let's say something like the salesman also mentions to you, if you buy this car right now, you are never going to be able to drive another car for the rest of your life. This is the only car that you can have. You can't ever come on the lot and test drive a car. You can't even look at pictures of cars on the internet. You can't do anything. This is the only car you can have. And also, another point, let's say you as a man happen to know that like in your career and your job is planning to give you like 5 significant promotions over the next 5 years that come with huge salary increases, right? So your choice is now, okay, in 5 years, I could purchase the car of my dreams, or I could purchase this car right here that's bad value and never have another car in the rest of my life. I know that that's an absurd scenario, but I think I'm trying to use it to illustrate This is what Rollo thinks women are doing to men. He thinks that they are horrible, deceptive salesmen trying to put a pawn off a bad deal on men. And men are blue-pilled men are unaware that this is going on, but red-pilled men see the game for what it is and know this is what's happening. Right. So if you know that this is what's happening, well, then you can fucking end around it. Right. He's very much just like, okay, well, now we know what the game is. Now we can rig the game. And that's where he goes next with it, is behaviors and stuff to rig the game.
Yeah, I was about to ask what the recommended next step is, because it seems like that could drive people to the quote-unquote black-pilled manosphere where they just swear off romance with women altogether.
And it does, right? So black-pilled, you're talking about incels, right? Incels, we talked about in the game a little bit. They're the reaction to pickup artists, right? So there are a faction of men out here who hear Rollo and they go, dude, that makes so much fucking sense. Like even me, before in this podcast when I was like, oh, this kind of matches up with my experience, right? But some men will go, this matches up with my experience. Tell me more. And those men who have bought this red pill hear about it. They buy Rollo's books. They subscribe to his channel. They give him money in various ways and forms. And then they don't have any success. Because again, this is all based off of logic that just at the root isn't true. The root belief of this isn't true. So like it doesn't work. So when it doesn't work, well, now the people that were trying to help them they realize that they were the ones that got had, right? They're the victim. And they go, well, fuck it. None of it's worth it. Like it's all fucking horrible. Like women win. They've won the world. I'm never going to have a romantic partner. I am now an incel. And those are when people turn violent, right? Then you radicalize them further. And incels, while they're not all violent at all, even the majority aren't violent. There are definitely some who are. And it is a dangerous powder keg in there. And they get to that place through these PUAs, like Rollo. So I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. Okay. So this is where shit gets darker. So, Rollo believes that hypergamy is also to blame for all pro-choice abortion laws, right? So anywhere that's got a pro-choice abortion law, that is because of hypergamy. Consent laws are the way they are because of hypergamy. Divorce laws, child, what do you call it? Like
Custody.
Child custody. Yeah, child custody laws are all in favor of women because of hypergamy, right? So all of these laws, Omaha, preemptive Omaha, all of these laws are under the false assumption that men are in charge of dating and relationships in society. So men are actually not the dominant force in society and in relationships to Rollo. Women are. Women are the gatekeepers to sex. They are the ones that are deciding whether people have sex or not. They are the ones deciding whether a man enters a relationship. They are the ones deciding if they don't like a man, they can call and have a false rape accusation, or they can take a man for all he's worth, right? So they are, in Rollo's mind, the oppressors. Men are the victims. He cites the same studies over and over again on Tinder that show that, like, survey data from Tinder, men on average swipe right on 60% of the people that they get in front of their face, and women swipe right on just 4%. So showing that, women are in charge of this market. Women are the ones that are selecting. Men are not selective at all. Women are the ones doing this. So therefore they're in control. So to make laws that favor them when they are the one, if they were the victims, then yeah, these laws would make sense, but they're not. They're the ones that have control and access. So they are just further, further oppressing men through this system because of hypergamy
You
because they're
know,
trying to confuse paternity, because they are trying to break free of a patriarchal system, and hypergamy has run amok now. Now we get laws where women are continuing to oppress men, right?
I mean, the
And
numbers that women swipe right on would be a little bit higher if 96% of the men on Tinder didn't just hold up fish in their photos.
that is true. That is 100% true. So the Tinder thing is interesting because after my divorce, I was on Tinder, right? And I would 100% agree with the 60%. I swiped right on 60% of women. I started, okay. So men on Tinder, it's a different game than women on Tinder. So women, you might learn something if you're listening to this. So many women could complain that I didn't read their profiles before I swiped, and I was like, because the game's different. I might only get one or two replies from like all the swiping that I'm doing. So like it doesn't benefit me to go in there and read a woman's profile and look at her and try to see if she's the perfect match and spend all that time trying to figure that out when she ain't gonna swipe on me most likely. So the tactic that a lot of men use, and I know this is because I learned it from one, is you just swipe right on everybody, and then the ones who reply to you, then you go back and you research them a little bit more and you see if they're a good match. So
I will also
um,
say that I had that same thing said to me where it's like men don't never read profiles. And the person saying it, I was like, I quickly found out she hadn't read my profile and we were on a date.
yeah, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it from a time investment perspective to like read a woman's profile at the beginning. You just swipe, 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 swipe,
Well,
swipe because so few. So like I see this as this data that he cites, and he says it's a study, and he never actually really tells a study, but you can search it online and find a bunch of news articles that say this is like about the right ratio. It varies on the year. But I think that's true. Yeah, again, it's just another example of like something that I think is true, but the reason for it isn't hypergamy. The reason is women got standards. Yeah.
well, I think also that it's every woman that I've ever talked to about a dating app says that she's just inundated by likes, by messages, like overwhelmed. And as a dude, that's just not the case. So, like, there's also
Yeah.
the factor of just like men are constantly being I'll use the word aggressors, but like the initiators like on these apps over and over and over again. Now, whether it's because it's a numbers game, whether it's because men are more flexible with their standards, whatever it is, or just like, willing to sleep with anybody, like who the fuck knows? But women, the numbers are in their favor that they have more to choose from. Therefore, they don't need to swipe on as many people, especially if they have, like one of the accounts where you can see who liked you before like even swiping on them.
Well, yeah, and also just like, okay, maybe you can like really narrowly pick out a small segment or small area of society where it like actually is harder to be a man than it is to be a woman. But like, we're not talking about like women aren't out there being like, God, it's really hard to find people on dating apps. Like they're talking about systemic oppression. That's like, hey, the wage gap, I don't get paid as much as you. And then men are like, and Rolo's like, well, it's harder to get a match on Tinder for us. It's like, it just feels like, dude, you're you're that evidence is not as strong as I think you think it is.
I see where you're going with it. I think there's like weird little nuances to how those arguments have evolved, especially in recent years. But I don't think that's here nor there on the hypergamy
Oh,
episode. So
it's not here nor there.
yeah.
Yeah, we can do a deep dive on why it is harder for men on Tinder because I do think that is interesting in some ways. But for the purposes of hypergamy, I the fact that uh, that gap exists or that it's harder for men is not proof of something nefarious. It's just proof of so many other societal um, conventions and things around dating that it's just not proving what you think it is, Rolo. But he thinks that that is like absolute proof. So I wanted to put that in
Yeah,
there that like
fair.
that is his thing. So men in his mind are the ones that are again in the oppressed position of when it comes to society, right? They are the ones that are being oppressed because hypergamy has won. Modern feminism has won. That is the worldview of the time, and you can't change it. According to Rollo, you can't change it. The only thing you can do is be aware of it and run ends around it. Um, So he also says that in addition to having no power in society, men are also given the responsibility for society and for relationships, right? So men have all the responsibility in the relationship, i.e., they're the ones that have to lead the relationships. They're the ones that have to initiate the relationships. They're the ones that have to still a broadly accepted societal concept is that they pay for the relationship. They pay for everything if they can, right? They pay child support. They pay the majority of the child support. They pay the majority of the alimony. They have all of these things that they have to take responsibility for, but they get none of the authority. Hypergamy has taken away any of the control or any of the authority that they have over the relationship. Right. So in Rollo's mind, women have the best of both worlds now, right? They have no responsibility and they have full control.
Who
Right. And
hurt you,
Rollo,
Rolo?
oh,
Who hurt you?
who hurt you? Well, his quote about this, and I think it's a very weird quote, very scary, is he always says responsibility without authority is slavery. And like from like a word logic point of view, I'm like, yeah, I see how you get there, right? If you have no if you are complete accountability over your circumstances, but you have no ability to control your circumstances, well, then that's just the same as, kind of being subjugated. Um, so in Rollo's mind, society still expects men to take responsibility, especially financial responsibility for children and partners. And society, through hypergamy-centered laws and policies, have taken away any authority men have over their relationships. Therefore, men are slaves in Rollo's worldview. Right. So when you hear the zeal and you hear the passion that he's talking about these issues with, it's because it's coming from a righteous place. It's coming from a social justice place for Rollo. It's coming from give us our rights now, um, kind of place. Rollo genuinely believes that men are slaves. He genuinely believes that they are oppressed. Um, so once you try to figure that out, that's like, ooh, this is real scary. uh, Rollo, notably though, doesn't advocate for changing any laws or policies. He does not take it to the place of action and say men are oppressed, therefore we need to change laws. He is very fatalist and says that he's given up. You can't change these laws. Feminism won back in the 60s and 70s. There is no getting around it. Like I said, the only option you have is to run ends around it. And that's different than other places in the red-pilled manosphere, which very much see some same version of the injustice, quote unquote, injustice that Rollo sees. However, they then take it to the place of we need to change laws. We need to take away no fault divorce. We need to take away birth control from women. Rollo doesn't believe that we should take away birth control. Rollo doesn't believe that we should change Roe v. Wade or change any laws or anything. But Rollo doesn't care. He's neutral on political issues. He just says this is the way it is, so we have to change it. So Rollo says that men can circumnavigate hypergamy by holding a patriarchal frame through a combination of their game, which is the alpha side, and status maxing, which is the beta side, right? So I use the word frame there. It's the first time I think I've used it in the episode. It's a big concept in pickup artist community. Nathaniel, do you remember anything about frame? We talked about it
Yeah,
a
they're
little bit.
obsessed about controlling the frame, basically controlling the parameters in which some sort of interaction is happening.
Yeah. They want you to step into their world rather than them stepping into your world. I think it's kind of a close-up magician thing. Mystery kind of popularized frame as a concept, and Mystery was a close-up magician. So if you think about like full-on Chris Angel, like what he's doing or what a close-up magician is doing is performing a trick in front of you, but very, very carefully curating your experience about what's happening to make it appear like they're doing one thing when really if you were to like look behind the scenes or look behind them, you'd see a very different experience, right? So frame is how the other person is viewing you, right? And so Rollo says you got to hold a patriarchal frame. Like you've got to hypergamy has a natural check, and that is patriarchy. So in Rollo's mind, patriarchy was a balanced system. Patriarchy traded control. Men got control and authority over relationships. and women got safety and security out of them. So it was a trade. So Rollo, when he says hold a patriarchal frame, he's really thinking about um, help the woman, get her out of this horrible system and into a fair system, which is an interesting way to look at it. And is very clear that this is all about keeping a patriarchal lineage. Um, it's not, I almost used the word pure, but that's not what it is. It's not eugenics. It's transparent. That's the better word. So like that, that your genes are passed down. Um, so Rollo, this leads to beliefs that he has. I'll give you a couple quotes here. Never let a woman be in control of the birth. So Rollo very much believes that a woman should not have any control over the birth of their children, i.e., how that's going to happen, in what ways does that happen,
That's fucked up.
all different kinds of things. Yeah, doesn't believe a woman should do that. It should be a man that's in control of that, right? Because you're trying to ensure paternity. Um, this is not a direct line, but it made me so think of Nick Fuentes just after Trump's election saying, "Your body, my choice," 100%. And this is even taken by the red pilled manosphere to mean never let a woman be in charge of the birth control. So if a woman's on a pill, they don't say the pill's bad. They say if a woman's on a pill, it's because you put her on a pill. If the woman's off the pill, it's because you put her off the pill. If you're wearing a condom, it's because you want to do that, right? So never let a woman be in control of that because that is submitting to her hypergamous frame, right? To confuse paternity. So that made me think of, right? There's just a lot of talk in the far right now of banning birth control, banning hormonal birth control, and that's reflected here in the PUA community this way. It's reflected other ways in the red pill manosphere, like I'm thinking tradcons and the Christian fundamentalist and evangelical space is coming at it from a more like that's not God's will kind of thing. Like you shouldn't be on birth control because God says you shouldn't be on birth control. You should have as many children as possible. And you get the same view here, but just in a different logical way. So I think it's interesting. The interesting, I'll use diversity, quote unquote, in the red pill is like how they get to the same ideas. There's like 5 or 6 main beliefs that they all hold, and they get there in so many different little ways. And this is the way Rollo's getting to the women shouldn't have birth control unless you want it kind of thing. Rollo does not believe in marriage, like many in the red pill manosphere. That's a difference than like these tradcon spaces, these Christian fundamentalist spaces that are very much into marriage, right? You need to be married. Rollo with like the secular red pill, where religion is absent, they just necessarily say you should never get married. Just don't ever get married. And he advocates there's a conservative idea right now to get rid of no fault divorce. You might have heard a lot of people talking about it in the news. It's like it's a conservative talking point, talking about getting rid of no fault divorce, because they say that feminists got no fault divorce and it's ruined society. Rollo doesn't believe in no fault divorce, but he gets there by just saying, "Don't get married at all." If you don't get married at all, then you can't come from that way. He equates getting married to handing a woman a loaded gun and having her pointed at your head. So that's the metaphor he uses with it. And there's another person, a woman in the red pill manosphere, a content creator named Pearl Davis, and she also believes nobody should ever get married. But the way she describes it is, why would you sign a business contract with someone where they are paid to leave? So very much on the idea that women's going to take half your shit. A woman can at any point in time pull the trigger and take half your shit and run. So there's no reason to ever be in a long-term marriage relationship. So when we talk about the male loneliness epidemic and we wonder why. So I want to introduce the concept here of dread. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Do you remember what do you remember about we talked about dread?
I remember there's active dread and there's passive dread, but basically it boils down to keeping your female partner on edge so that you maintain dominance over her and her thinking of behavior.
Yeah. So in the alpha fuck side, the way that you can maintain frame for Rolo is to use dread. So dread is just like reasserting your patriarchal frame of a relationship, um, and so it appeals to a woman's alpha fuck side of hypergamy. He very much is clear that women want you to be doing this, right? It is pleasurable to them that you're doing this dread. Um, and dread is where a man deliberately creates or amplifies a woman's fear of losing him in order to maintain her sexual interest and compliance. So the logic is women are thought to be more attracted to men that they perceive as having higher SMV than them, right? Women are always chasing that alpha fuck side. They want the alpha, right? They want somebody who is above them. So what you've got to do in a long-term relationship or any relationship is to constantly remind the woman that you are better than her. And so if a woman believes that her man could leave her for someone quote unquote more valuable, i.e., we're talking about women, value is added by they're younger, they're more attractive, they're more feminine, they have a higher sex drive, whatever, right? Whatever that more valuable. If you believe that your man could leave you for someone more valuable, then you will be motivated to invest more into a relationship, to stay sexually available, to not take him for granted, quote unquote, i.e., don't nag him, that kind of stuff. So his theory is act better than her, remind her that you're better than her, and she will constantly be trying for your attention. Which, if she's already an insecure person, like you are fucking with somebody that's so bad. So men can create relationship dread by signaling higher status, pre-selection, and independence. If they create an environment, if he can create an environment of dread while at the same time working on his own status, i.e., getting a better job, getting more money, getting more clout in the community, now you're ensuring that you're satisfying both the alpha fuck side and the beta bucks side that she's attracted to. So you can hold a woman forever if you max out all your beta characteristics, your money, your power, your all that kind of stuff, and continuing to just introduce dread into a relationship. Those are what a woman wants, right? So you are correct when you said there are two types of dread. It's active and passive dread. Passive dread is when a man just lives his life at high value, right? So he has a good career. He stays very physically fit. He gets higher and higher amounts of income and just does that so that a woman will kind of naturally be like, oh shit, I got to keep up, right? And to some extent, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Dread is a horrible thing, but this kind of passive dread, what Rollo is just describing is like working on yourself, but he puts an extrinsic frame on it. Excuse me. Yeah, an extrinsic frame on it rather than an intrinsic frame. Like he's like, work on yourself so that she will feel that she needs to work on herself. And it's like, or just work on yourself because you want to work on yourself. But passive dread in that way is like the behaviors you do to employ passive dread just look like self-improvement on some level. Now, active dread, that's where you intentionally induce jealousy or uncertainty, like mentioning, hey, I was at the store and this woman thought I was really hot, or like even actively flirting to other women in front of your partner. Texting other women, texting people, all of these being less available, like with your time, or being more emotionally closed off. So if you emotionally close off from her, if she's feeling too close to you and you just kind of intentionally don't give her any kind of love and support, that is creating dread that he might be out pursuing other people. He might have other options, better options. And so that active kind of dread that you can impose, your ability to do that was directly related to your ability to have a successful relationship, which so that's where this shit can get to. I want to end it on dread because I think it's good to kind of go into like a little discussion at this point about like hypergamy as a whole and how it shows up. Um, so Nathaniel, to you, what themes does hypergamy, what we just talked about, um, what themes do you see in this that you also see in the red pill manosphere? We talked a little bit about them, but do you see any extras or anything?
I mean, you kind of hit all the notes. One thing that you brought up that was interesting is that there are like basically five core beliefs in the manosphere and the red pill manosphere, and the ways that different sections of that community find their way there are all different. So that's something to call out that might be interesting for a future episode. But like, I mean, the ideas of like putting systems around something that's human behavior in order to drive behavior that is a little bit less human. That's interesting. I mean, it's
I
just
put down one here. I said a thing versus the thing. So like I see this coming up now more as I research in Red Pill, where it's like they take a thing and they say it's the thing,
right.
right? In this case, it's hypergamy, where it's like, yeah, it's a thing. It is certainly in the soup of the complicated like human romance relationships, but it's not the thing by any means.
To reflect
If
what I'm
it's
hearing back, it sounds like they want to justify certain modes of behavior or interaction, so they find a thing that can be pointed to as justification.
Yeah, exactly. They take I mentioned this before, they take a thing that's like obscure enough to where the general like public doesn't know about it or probably doesn't the general person doesn't know about it, but also like is creditable enough that like nobody has an objection to it. It's just like nobody's heard about hypergamy because there was no need to know about hypergamy. Like there's not a thing that you have to think of in your life. There are so many other more important things when choosing a romantic partner than like thinking about hypergamy and that kind of stuff. And they make it an entire fucking worldview,
Well,
right?
if they want
Um,
to, if you're looking for a reason to resent or manipulate women, this is a pretty, convenient tool to point to.
yeah, and I think it's also well, it's also grifter, right? So part of me feels like it's less so with Rolo and more so with other people in the manosphere, but Rolo is in there where it's like, okay, grifters use this technique where they just say like, hey, I've got this one trick or this all you need is this one tip or you need to know this one thing to get more pussy, right? And Rolo I think is doing that with hypergamy a little bit where he's going, it's just this one thing, man. All you got to know about is hypergamy. And what's hypergamy? Well, buy this book. You know. So there's a little bit of it in there where it's like you if you pick that thing that is like I said that is a thing and you try to and you make it the thing in your life, you can um, create value in it and sell things and sell books or sell subscriptions to your podcast or whatever you can do. So I feel like he has done that here with hypergamy, where he's taken a thing that's nobody needs to really worry about or ever did worry about, and just builds an entire worldview around it and sells that worldview to people. Um, how do you feel about capitalism in as applies to romantic relationships? Because that was the big thing as I kept researching here. I was just like, Jesus Christ, like, do we have to bring capitalism now into our romantic relationships?
Well, I forget if it was in an episode or an offline conversation, but I really think capitalism is the big baddie behind a lot of this. It's
Hmm.
transactional thinking, it's hierarchies, it's manipulation to get gain, it's individualism. And this is something that came up actually yesterday, which we haven't touched on yet, which is a lot of this is about maxing what your take is at the potential detriment of other people to get your way at all costs. And there's the very kind of, I think, American mindset, but it's probably everywhere, that pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The more you succeed, the more you get, the more successful you are. Like you have won at life, the more that you take and land for yourself at all costs. And we're a country that's built on that in many different ways. And at the same time, if you're to look at, I think this is how it kind of went in our conversation yesterday. The way it plays out is if you if you follow like an example of like a dude who's married, reaches, his sexual peak, quote unquote, between 35 and 50, as his wife aging along with him, loses her sexual peak for whatever reason, he decides when a young woman comes into his life, it's worth that risk, ends up losing the marriage. Most likely that relationship that drew the marriage out isn't going to be like a new soulmate. It's going to be the reason for the divorce, which leaves the man alone. So this pursuit of individual gain actually leaves him having less. And I think that to paint it as always on the up and up and up, like you follow these things, you just chase what's all individually yours, it will turn out well, I think has not only not done that at the individual level, it's also fractured us into a very individualist mindset. I think you talked about this a lot in a previous episode, that rugged individualism is a problem because you stop caring about your neighbor. You stop caring about what's best for somebody else at a minimum on the same level as what's best for you, let alone like before what's best for you. And I think that part of what this podcast, this core argument of this podcast is, dates back to what we first talked about, which was empathy. Empathy feels dangerous nowadays. And we haven't touched on this episode. We'll touch on future ones, but at the time we're recording this, the Charlie Kirk shooting is still pretty fresh. And there's a lot of dialogue coming out of that. And I think there is a world in which something like this sends off alarm bells and brings people back together and brings the temperature down. But as of recording this, that does not seem to be the case. And I think part of the argument for this podcast is we need to remember that this country is not going to be great unless we consider one another. If we all keep looking for that knee-jerk, easy solution thing, that's the one thing that will make my life better, how am I a victim? What am I do? How have I been wronged? Then the entire world is going to look like it's one big wrong, and there will never stop being resentment. So it's less about capitalism, and it needs to be a little bit about the inverse of that, where we stop and try to mend things back together by getting rid of the individualist mindset, or at the very least minimizing it, not letting it drive the bus.
Yeah, and then with capitalism specifically, like we went through a period as humans where we applied capitalism to relationships, and it was called social Darwinism, right? Which is just like we all know is not the way capitalism should be applied. Like capitalism was never intended to, at its purest form, was never even intended to govern anything in human relationships. But I don't know if it's a factor of modern society or if it's a factor of America or probably both. But like we have a need to want to apply capitalism to everything. And like the issue with capitalism is it, well, not even the issue, like understandably, it is about self gain. The only reason you're a capitalist is to improve yourself. And if you can help somebody else along the way, yeah, that's great. But you're all in it for you. And like that at least makes sense when you contain it to a professional business like standpoint. But when you start bringing that in to human interactions and things like love, like this is the kind of shit you get yourself into, where you're all of a sudden being like, well, the best thing for me is if she feels really shitty in this relationship. Because if she feels shitty, then she'll want me more. And I was like, what? Again, like he backflips himself into so much misogyny.
Well, it's selfishness, like, yes, it's misogyny, but it's just selfishness.
Well, selfishness, one thing, but selfishness to the degree that this is like, this is not just everyday run-of-the-mill selfishness in relationship. This is like creating an entire system for, or creating an entire worldview where it is all about you. That's megalomaniacal. That is all-encompassing narcissism at that point. It goes beyond just general selfishness at that thing. But
you touched on something.
Why is this? Oh, I was going to say, why is this so appealing? Why do you think it's so appealing to see yourself as a victim? I'm not talking about you, Nathaniel. I'm talking about just like in general. Yeah. There is a human appeal to see yourself as a victim. And I feel like that's present in here. Like, these men want to see themselves as the victim, right? The reason they
Hmm.
create a system that said they were a victim is because they want, at some level, to seem like a victim, and that is appealing. But why do you think that is?
Because everybody needs to be the hero of their story. And at a gut level, an intuitive level, you know when you're doing something that's wrong. And justifying it helps relieve that feeling.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely all of that. And for me, there's also an element where it's like, yeah, it kind of is around what you say, but just even the pre to that, where it's like you, it's good to think of yourself as suffering. And I'm talking about personal experience here. Just like, you know, there's something I don't know if it's masochism or it's just like something where you like, when you are suffering, you can feel like a martyr or you can feel like you're really enduring it. Right. And that is like satisfying on some level. So the need to put yourself in that victim role so that you can seem like you are the one suffering. It kind of gets at what you're at, but it's just like that appeal is like some weird, I don't want to use a judgy word and say like perverse, but like it's a weird mindset that you can get yourself into that I think on some level is appealing to all people. Um,
Yeah, I think you're
and it
touching
seems
on
like,
something there. I think you're
yeah, but
touching
also
on
like,
the need to feel strong without necessarily having to overcome anything.
yeah, yeah. I guess what I mean is like I'm thinking about it through the lens of like, okay, well, if how do you keep people from falling into that, right? like like that's something I can identify in myself about like this red pill and being like why I didn't take this road is like I never viewed myself as a victim um in this world. Like I didn't see all this stuff and go, "Oh, I'm being oppressed." I see what they're saying and I go, oh, that feels a little weird. So, like the men that already are predisposed to see themselves as a victim, when it comes specifically to these relationships, like, like if you're primed and in a place where you want to seem like a victim, you can fall for these traps, and you can fall for this radicalization. And so, it seems to be an integral point on like how do you stop it? Is like, okay, how do you keep people from getting into that victim mindset? um, what do you did the red pill get anything right with hypergamy? Big or small? I mentioned a couple times where I'm like, I think that's right. But to you, was there anything in there where it's like, okay, I see what they're saying, or I understand them. I understand where they got to.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it. But I think that there are inherent things that people are attracted to at different points of their life. Um, and it's not necessarily bad, but what they do is they take, they being, people who push forward ideas for suppression and oppression, they take inherent human, you know, quasi truths and they extend it to be absolute certainties. And then they put together a dogmatic resolution to fix a wrong that's not even necessarily a wrong to justify something
Hmm.
else.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Uh, thoughts on the dual nature of a woman? Thoughts on that? That's a trope that comes up a lot in society, right? Women are duplicitous. They are not trustworthy. They'll tell you one thing on Monday and tell you something different on Tuesday. And like that kind of stereotype and trope as a woman.
Let me put it like this.
Yeah.
There's no absolute answer. Every person is different. I have found communication and thought patterns are very different from a female perspective than a male perspective. There was one instance where I was walking around with an ex, and I happened to ask, like, someone cued me and asked, like, what was on her mind or something, and she listed off 15 things. And I was like, so you've thought about, like, since we left where we just were at? And it's like, no, I'm thinking about all that right now. And I'm like, at most, I have 3. And I think part of that is navigating societal norms where, like, right now I'm with somebody that is an incredibly honest communicator, incredibly forthright, and still carries forward some societal things that we talk openly about, where it's like sometimes she doesn't want to be the initiator with, too much texting. And that's not because she doesn't want to text. And it's not because she doesn't light up when I text her. It's just that there's something in there that's a balancing act between what she wants versus what's quote unquote appropriate. And so I think that there's a whole lot of factors and a whole lot of concurrent thought processes that men only scratch the surface in being able to understand, even when you have really open communication. And it might or might not influence behavior or preferences or change based on times in the month or times in year or whatever else like that. I think a woman is a complex animal that I hope to understand someday, but I'm not hinging my worth on it because it is hard. And the best I can do is just try to show up and be honest myself and hope I engage authentically conversely,
Yeah, you heard it here, folks. Nathaniel thinks women are animals.